Hello, everyone. My name is Robert Winfree, and what you're about to listen to is an old episode of a podcast I used to host called Everyone Loves a Bad Guy. This particular episode is another part of my. This might have been the conclusion of this particular chapter of my journey through the various comic book titles, and it's a look at more independent comics. So, I know titles at least. Some of these, depending on which point in history we're talking about, are now owned by the bigger publishers because, well, that's just how things go. But stuff like Image, Dark Horse, Vertigo, the stuff that would get a little bit darker, a little bit more adult than your mainline standard Marvel or DC fare. So stuff like Spawn, The Walking Dead, Preacher, that kind of thing. That's all sort of on the table here. And myself and Jesse Starcher, who is a big fan of comics, we go through a bunch of stuff like that. Again, different titles, some of their adaptations, again, with another focus, again, on the villains. Not so much the heroes, because, well, this show is Everyone Loves a Bad Guy. You kind of know what you're getting into there. So with that out of the way, thank you very much for listening. Interacting with the product is always helpful. Like, comment, subscribe. Anything you can do there. This show originally aired March 30th, 2014. So anything that happened after the fact with respect to some of the titles we're discussing here, don't get mad at us. Hadn't happened yet. It was 2014. It was a different time. It was a very different time, especially in a lot of our personal lives. So anyway, that's it. That's the preamble. Thank you again for listening. Hope you all enjoy the show.
When the devil is too busy and debt a bit too much, they call on me by name, you see, for my special touch. To the gentlemen, I'm misfortune. To the ladies, I'm surprise. But call me by any name, anyway, it's all the same. I'm the fly in your suit, I'm the pebble in your shoe, I'm the key beneath your bed, I'm a bump on every head, I'm the heel on which you slip, I'm a pin in every head, I'm the thorn in your side, makes you wriggle and writhe, and it's so easy when you're evil. This is the light you see, the devil tips his hat to me, I do it all because I'm evil, and I do it all for free. Your tears are all the pay I'll ever need.
All right, everyone. Hello, and welcome to another edition of Everyone Loves a Bad Guy. I am your host, your resident authority on evil, Robert Winfree, and thank you also very much for joining us live after the fact, however you got here. If you're reading a transcript, I don't care. I'm glad you're here, however you got here. All right, we're going to jump right into this one tonight. For the last month or so, couple of months, seems interminable when you're in the middle of something, here on Everyone Loves a Bad Guy, I've devoted time and energy to comic book villains, franchises, characters, all the fun stuff. Much fun was had, but I'm kind of burned out on them. So for the moment, we are wrapping up our exploration of comic villains tonight, and we're moving on next week, or maybe the week after if I really feel I need to recharge my batteries, but I'll decide that later. But we are concluding it by tackling your favorites, everyone out there. Whatever you enjoy from independent titles, and what I mean by independent, you see, I know Vertigo, is actually owned by DC or one of them. I know that stuff like Vertigo, Image, Dark Horse, most of them are owned indirectly by DC or Marvel, but they don't fall under the DC or Marvel titles, so they do other stuff. They get away with more. You have crazier storylines, so on and so forth. So that's where we're focusing tonight. Now, since this is the comic finale extravaganza, you're more than welcome to call in. Focusing on guys from those titles, questions, comments, any of that fun stuff. If you wish to do so, the number is 323-657-0901. Once again, 323-657-0901. And I'll do my darndest to get you on the air. Hang on. Before I bring out my special guest, I have one disclaimer. Everybody out there listening, live after the fact, however, pay attention for just a minute, then you can go back to half list. I've never cared that much about spoilers as far as my shows go, because it happens and I don't generally care. Other people do. This is your warning. Everybody out there, we will be discussing ongoing material a little bit, stuff you may not have read, stuff that has happened in one medium, not in the other, so on and so forth. So if you're not up to date, there's a really, really good chance there's going to be spoilers in here. That's your warning. So from this point forward, listen at your own peril. And bear in mind, this includes me in some circumstances, because I could not possibly have done all the research I really wanted to with just a week. So if you want to call in and, discuss something that I'm not familiar with, I'm not going to cry foul. I'm not going to complain about spoilers. It's a possibility in this zone. Everyone out there is now aware of it. There's your warning. We're all moving forward. All right. And moving forward is my special guest for this evening. His, first time as my, sort of featured special guest. I believe he called in once before. But everybody, welcome one of my longtime supporter of the show, Jesse Starcher, is here with us. How you doing, Jesse?
Going good, Robert. I appreciate you bringing me on here, and it's an honor and a privilege. And let me just start out by saying here real quick, I actually can remember calling in on the first episode of the comic coverage that you were doing, and it was 3 months ago. Because I was looking this up today, I just kind of wanted to figure how many books and titles and stuff that you'd covered. X-Men, I believe, was the first one that you did, and I can remember. I believe I called in on that one, and I think you and Cooper were doing that one. Yeah, you and Cooper were doing that one, and boy, it's been a journey, man. You're talking 3 months and almost every week.
Yeah,
I don't blame you for being burnt. I don't blame you for being burnt out at all. Not at all.
Well, you called in on that one. I believe it was Cooper and myself. It might have been somebody else, but at the very least it was Cooper. The other thing, I think I could have sworn it's you or Teasley. I don't remember who called in when I was talking about Frankenstein's monster last year almost. Yeah.
That was me. I think you got me confused with Teasley.
I did, because I'd been talking with him about potentially being my guest, and then you called in, and between like your name sounding similar, you have not identical, but if I'm not paying attention, somewhat similar accents. So, hey, I'm glad to have you here.
You got it right. You got it right tonight, and that's all that matters.
Yeah, we're moving forward. All right. Well, let's go ahead and get started with this. Let's start off with probably one of the bigger ones, one of the more commercially successful independent comic titles in, debatably ever, but Robert Kirkman's ongoing serial, The Walking Dead, which is not just an ongoing comic, it's also an ongoing television series done on AMC. One of my favorites, 9 times out of 10. Some episodes vary, as far as stuff on television goes. So I'm curious, how did you you and I talked a little bit about this. I know you're familiar with everything that's going on, though. I might spoil a thing or two if you're not up to, the last issue, but, we all know that's going to happen, and I know you're reading it anyway. But how did you come across the title of The Walking Dead? Did you start with the comics and then go to the show kind of walk me through how you came to it.
Yeah, sure. Well, I can remember, it was definitely the show first. I had not known it was a comic book until probably, a good 3 or 4 episodes in. I can remember watching the first show. I found it on demand, and I was messing around. It was right after my son was born, and my wife was sitting upstairs, and I was like, okay, I'm going to watch it. She hates zombies. Let's just go ahead. I'm going to tell you right now, she absolutely cannot stand zombies. If somebody walks toward her and, drags a foot and sticks an arm out, she's running the other way. So I was like, okay, I'm going to sit down and watch this by myself. And I watched it, and I was like, man, this is a really, really good show. And I don't know how I convinced her to watch it, but I got her to sit down and watch the first episode with me, and she was hooked, just like millions of other people across the nation. They were, she's watching it, and of course, I think we were like 3 or 4 episodes behind when we first started watching it. Got all caught up, and of course, we're waiting week by week for this show to come out and on pins and needles. But it's the only zombie show she'll probably ever watch and actually admit that she enjoys. But yeah, that was how we came to it. After that, I found out it was a comic book. I really did not start reading the comic up until last year. It was probably about, I would say, April or so last year. I found the comics, we'll just say online, and started reading them, back to back to back. And yeah, we found them. About 1,000 other people helped me. I started reading them back to back, and it's one of those things where you get. It's just like the show. You get to the last page and you're like, oh man, I've got to read this next issue. And it just goes to show you the writing that Kirkman does is tremendous, because it has you sitting there waiting for that next issue. And I can remember getting to the end of the issue and seeing his letter pages. And, of course, the show was last year. The show had been, I can't remember what season we're in, 3 or 4 at that point in time.
Sure.
Okay. So at that, it was cool to watch as I was reading. You go to the letter pages, and he's talking about how the show is starting. And he's like, oh, we're getting some good ground. Hey, this is picked up for AMC. And then all of a sudden, you could tell he was amazed at how it caught on as a TV show. But yeah, that right there, and of course, now I'm at the point where I'm caught up on the show, caught up on the comic, and I'm just killing myself every month or every, waiting for that next issue to come out.
Yeah, it does kind of kick you in the teeth every now and then. As you can't wait for what's coming next. I'm really excited to see Rick kind of revert to being an uber badass. I don't care if he's locked in a boxcar. That man will absolutely wreck you if he gets half a chance.
Yeah, he's a badass.
Okay, now the show and the comics, there are differences. They're on the same track. They have kind of the same characters, but I real briefly, did the differences bother you as a fan? Who does both? Who reads the comics, watches the show? Do the differences bother you at all, or are you just kind of you accept that each medium is a little different? They
do not bother me at all. I can remember you go into work and you got 3 or 4 other people there are talking about the show, and I'm reading the comic, and I'm like, you guys got to read the comic, because, not only do you get, what I see it as is it's the best of both worlds. You got a show you can watch that's just a tad and just enough different from the comic to, keep the show interesting, and reading the comic is just that much interesting to me. It doesn't bother me at all that there's differences. As a matter of fact, it's one of my favorite things to go up and tell, the Walking Dead fan at work that, oh, yeah, well, this happened there on the show, but let me tell you what happened in the book. And to me, both of them are great because I enjoy both mediums. It doesn't bother me one bit.
Yeah, I like that. I'm going to touch briefly on Game of Thrones, and I actually have to apologize. I did this a while back, a few weeks at least, maybe a couple of months, but when Game of Thrones came back on HBO, I have read the books. I have not seen a single minute of any of the TV series, but I was enthralled with the book. I am anxiously awaiting the next one to come out because I finished Dance of Dragons a few weeks back, and oh, how tempted I am on a regular basis to wreck things for people. Now, here's what I did, and I absolutely have to apologize, and I believe I did, but if I didn't, here it is again. Because they started this current season with the death of Joffrey. And again, I warned everybody there's spoilers. So nobody complain to me about this. You have all been warned. And this was my issue. I didn't properly warn Sam or Cotty. We were talking on Twitter. And I was wrong on 2 counts. First of all, I accidentally let slip that Tyrion is the one who killed Joffrey, when actually it's not Tyrion, so I was wrong. And I thought they revealed it earlier, so I didn't intend to spoil anything. And it turns out I didn't, because it wasn't Tyrion. I reread that part not too long ago. But anyway, my bad. But the point there being, people who watch the show and very much enjoy it, I remember when the internet exploded with the end of Season 3 or whatever, with the Red Wedding. I recall my brother reading that in the book and heaving the book across the room. But that was like 3 years before the show. Some of those books have been out for a while. So, but I know people who won't read the book because they don't want to spoil the show for themselves. I understand that. I really do. I'm not sure that, there's, from what I understand, there's some pretty substantial differences coming out at this point. It's all still going in the same direction, but to get back to my point about The Walking Dead, you don't really spoil anything for yourself because it's generally things are going to be similar, but there's more than enough difference to make it interesting, and so that you're not worried about spoiling anything. I mean, major things possibly, but even then, I mean, Rick still has both hands in the television show.
That's right. Yeah,
and the governor.
I was going to say, as for Game of Thrones, it's amazing how much I know about that show. Not reading one damn thing about the book, and not watching one damn minute of the show. I mean, the Red Wedding was huge. I mean, it just blew up. I can remember it blowing up on the internet. And of course, listening to you, I know you've talked about it a good bit. But apparently that show's pretty damn good. And I'm gonna have to one of these days. I'm gonna have to jump in and watch it. But yeah, back to The Walking Dead. I mean, the difference is there between the comic and the show itself. Just like you said, I mean, Rick's still got his other hand in the show, and I mean.
Carl hasn't been shot in the face yet.
Yeah, he's still got an eye. He's still got both eyes. A lot of limbs and stuff, and appendages and organs are still intact. And but yeah, I love both mediums, and I have the same feeling. And I think I've heard you guys talk about it. I know Radulich has talked about it. You got your source material, your books that you read, and then you got the movies that are based off of them, and of course the shows and movies are taking their liberties, and that's one thing that doesn't seem to bother me as much as it does some other people. So I'm totally cool.
I had that violent kind of visceral reaction to someone messing with my source material maybe 3 times in my life, and the only one that really sticks out to me was Frank Darabont changing the ending of The Mist. Oh,
I've watched the movie. You're talking about the Mist, which is the one with. Is that Tom Jane?
Yeah, it's got Thomas Jane. It's based on a short story, a long short story, mind you, but a short story by Stephen King, same title. And he changed the ending, and I was pissed. And that was there's 2 reasons for that. One, I have an unnatural attachment to The Mist as a story, because by sheer chance, when I first decided I was going to read Stephen King, I picked up the short story collection. I forget which one it is, so Skeleton Crew, thank you. One of my brothers got my back. But I picked up Skeleton Crew purely by chance, and I started reading it, and The Mist is the first story in that. So my complete introduction to Stephen King was that story. So I have an irrational and kind of unnatural attachment to it. But, I thought about it. I can look at it and go, no, that is one of the ballsiest endings you could have had. And I respect it now. I don't like it, but I can, again, things are different, and I have to kind of learn to, you learn to live with that, or you implode from rage. And I decided I would rather not implode. But back to The Walking Dead, and here's one of source material versus what we saw on television. Let's talk a little bit about the Governor, because they are markedly different. And anyone who's never read the comics, if you've seen the show, when you first meet or introduced to Woodbury, it's this idyllic kind of peaceful, tranquil town, and it just happens to be run by a guy known as the Governor. And David Morrissey, I believe that's the actor, though don't quote me.
Yes, you're right.
Thank you. I knew Morrissey was the correct last name. I can never remember his first name, partially because I get Davids and Phillips and Brian's confused, and he went by both Brian and Philip.
Yeah. Yep.
Just really unfortunate coincidence as far as my my mental devices for remembering things. But in the comic books, he Woodbury. I keep calling it Mayberry, partially for the irony. But Woodbury is a town of psychos. But Woodbury is a town of psychos, and he's just the craziest psycho there is, and that gives him authority. And is, a massive clash. And then, of course, every now and then, the Governor in the television series gets pushed just a little, and you see, if you know the source material, you see him. Oh no, that's him. There he is. The Governor's the guy who guns down all of his own people because they won't follow his orders, or beats the guy to death with a golf club.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious, do you have a preference as to which version do you like one version better than the other?
Oh, I would probably, if I had to pick, I'd probably go with the one with that I have to go with Morrissey's character. It felt to me in the comic book itself, the Governor, he was batshit crazy. It just seemed like he was off his rocker. We'll just put it that way. And I remember reading, and of course, like I said, this was last year, so all this stuff had happened with the Governor, and it felt like the show, granted, the show is made to make you watch and want to watch, but it just felt like that drug on. I shouldn't say drug on because it was good, some parts. But the comic was like, you know, oh shit, here's the governor. Oh shit, we're throwing Rick and we're throwing all of them in the prison. They're going to fight each other, and I mean, just shit hit the fan in the comic real quick with the governor, and you could tell automatically he was psycho. But as far as villainy effect, I guess is what we call it, or villainous effect, I think the psychology of the governor on screen was done really well. And let me tell you something. Morrissey, I'm sure, now I've never watched it, but I know that after The Walking Dead, you got The Talking Dead.
Yeah.
And I remember they had Morrissey on afterwards, and they were going to, you know, he was going to sit down, and of course they did the little introduction in between, you know, the last part of the show. Hey, tune in for Talking Dead, and, you know, we've got the governor here, and the people booed his ass. He's an actor sitting on stage, and we got David Morrissey, and they booed David Morrissey because they hated the governor so bad.
Well, let's be fair. That's the episode where he kills Herschel.
Okay, good point. They're probably screening the episode at that time, so
it wouldn't. Well, it's done live, I think.
That would make sense. I'm talking to my wife, and I look at her. I said, I've never seen an actor actually get booed for portraying a character. Everybody should know that this guy, but, you know, unless I'm sure these people were just joining in and giving the guy a hard time. But I remember just being in awe. But to me, preference-wise, definitely governor on the screen.
Yes, well, let me ask you then, when going forward, we knew, I mean, if you read the comics, you knew the governor was coming. Did you like what David Morrissey did with him? I mean, I very much enjoyed it. I was enthralled by his ability, I mean, especially after he lost his eye, because this is a weird thing with a lot of actors. If you obscure their faces, and Pat Mullen and Mark Radlich and we've talked about this ad nauseum at times, if you obscure a contemporary actor's face in one way or another, I mean, some guys can't act through facial hair. Now he's got an eye patch. I mean, I'm only somewhat joking there. I mean, if you want an example, poor James Marsden, who plays Cyclops in the X-Men movie. I've seen James Marsden when he does not have a giant apparatus over, and I've seen him with a giant apparatus over his eyes, and with the apparatus, he sucks. He doesn't know how to act through it. I mean, and some guys, you know, you mess with their face, you know, you obscure the eyes, you get makeup on them, and they can't act. They can't emote properly. They're not used to it, and I've complained about that a fair amount. But I really liked what he was able to do, you know, once you got, I mean, even with, you know, after he loses the eye, once he's able to, you know, he's still able to emote. He's still able to get you, you know, so you understand what he's going through. I mean, if he hurts, you get it. If he's filled with self-righteous indignation, or if he's just lost his mind and is going and has to, you know, put down his, you know, kind of adopted daughter. I mean, you get it. So I love his.
Yeah, he did a dang good job. They're just like you said. It's interesting. Has this guy been in anything else other than The Walking Dead? And I'm asking. I'm not trying to be smart or anything, but I'm trying to figure out: is this guy a really accomplished actor, or is this something? Is this his first big break?
He's been in a few other things. Hang on, I will look it up.
I mean, off the top of my head, I can't think of anything.
The only thing I know off the top of my head, and I know this because I caught a brief moment of it on television, the Hilary Swank-led pseudo-religious thriller, The Reaping, several years ago. He plays the villain in that.
Okay. All right. Well,
all right.
I mean, kudos to this guy. Because he's done such a good job at making people hate him. I mean, they hate this guy. Well, at least they hated him. And I think now I can imagine all the people just cheering across the United States and across the world when the governor got his in the show. But
I did.
Yeah, I mean, he did it. I mean, he was a bastard. And in the comic books, in the comics, it's fun to see how he before he comes to the prison to get his revenge. I don't know if you remember what Michonne did to him in the comic books, but I can remember when I read that when Michonne was, excuse me, let me start over and get the babbling here. The crew, Rick and Michonne, and I believe Glenn is with them. I can't remember, but when they hit Woodbury, and they did on all that shit with the governor, I think Rick and Glenn escape, but Michonne is taken prisoner, and the governor, just how he's written in the comics, I think he rapes, sodomizes Michonne, keeps her in a prison cell, and just has his way with her. And I can't remember for how long, but I'm pretty sure, one day of that's going to make you turn into a blubbering mess. But, it was days before they could get back there. But when she gets out, I remember sending pictures of the panels of what Michonne did to the governor. And I was looking on Wikipedia today, and Michonne, I think he lost his eye. We all know that.
Yeah.
He lost his testicles. And I believe he lost an arm. I think he lost an arm too, either an arm or a leg. I can't remember. But she messed him up. I can remember. I was cheering then too. We'll just cut it at that. If you read the comic and you see when Michonne gets a hold of the governor, if you're not sitting there going, hell yes. But the unfortunate thing is he lives to try and get his revenge, and that he does.
And that leads to the death of Lori and baby Judith, and so many people die. And of course,
he's a bastard.
Well, then the governor gets offed by one of his own men after someone of his soldiers. I forget exactly who, but I think it's a woman who is the one who shoots Lori and through her body kills Judith on the governor's order as she's running away, and then in disgust she shoots the governor in the head.
Yes. Yep. And you almost want to see in the comic itself. You want to see more, but I think Kirkman gave you that with Michonne, because Michonne really messed him up. But yeah, he gets his in the end, and just like a lot of villains do, they reap what they sow.
Yeah, I think that they have to, and I've mentioned this before. If as a society we're telling stories wherein bad guys win in the end, we've got some serious problem.
Mm-hmm.
I do this podcast because a good villain makes a hero. You can't cheer for a hero if he's not overcoming something, and you have to kind of recognize that. But if he fails to overcome, if your hero loses, that's not a story that we should be telling. It's not a sentiment we should be propagating.
A lot of
bad guys have to fall.
Yeah, and it's unfortunately not too many people are going to read that story or watch that show if you ain't got that antagonism going on. So I absolutely 100% agree.
Well, since we're talking about The Walking Dead, let's go ahead and hit on the next big bad guy. Worse than the governor. Which,
we want to up the ante.
You think the governor's bad, everybody out there. Then you meet Negan. Oh, man.
Wow. So we already, I'm going to tell you right now, again, spoilers, because we're more than likely going to discuss Walking Dead number 100, which
at least
I should have never read that issue before I went to bed.
No, that will haunt you.
I felt so sad, mad, disgusted, and there's been two instances in which I've wanted to write a creator of a comic or a writer of a book. One of them I did back when I was in 8th grade. I think I wrote somebody. It was an Image comic, I believe, but I was so pissed off about something. This is another example. Negan is a horrible, horrible human being. I mean, I'll go ahead and let you expound upon that, because I'm sure that I can't even do it justice because he pisses me off so bad.
Well, he's got one of the best introductions that you can ask for if you want to establish a villain. He shows up, and he kills a main character. I mean, bear in mind, not an ancillary character, not a guy who's been in the background. And again, everyone out there, I already warned you. I'll warn you again, because more than likely this is going to happen in the television show. So if you're not up to date, this is your last warning. Negan shows up and decides, I'll kill Glenn, and proceeds to beat him to death with a baseball bat wrapped in barbed wire.
Yeah, wrapped in barbed wire. What made me feel so bad about this was the fact that I'm sure, Kirkman's got his evil ways of writing this, I believe Maggie had found out she was pregnant at that point in time. And Glenn and Maggie's relationship was, that was tumultuous just to begin with because, she tried to kill herself in the comics at one point, and he brought her back. And, this is the thing you're rooting for. You're wanting to see in The Walking Dead. You're wanting to see something resembling humanity and love pop up out of this horrible earth that these guys are walking on. And here comes Negan, and he shows up, and, Rick, Glenn, I can't remember who else was out on the party with him. I know it was 3 or 4 other. And was Maggie with them at that point in time? Was Maggie with them?
No. Maggie was back.
I wish I could remember.
No,
okay.
Maggie was back at their settlement. It was Rick, Glenn, Carl was there. There were like 2 other people.
Okay, all right.
No, Maggie wasn't there. I know what I'm talking about. Sorry, talking to one. All right. But no, Maggie was not there.
Okay. So, you're seeing this, Glenn's going to become a father, and this is the one character I know for a fact that everybody out there watching Walking Dead right now at this point in time would never want to see die. If you wanted to see, you can probably deal with Herschel. You can deal with Herschel. But if they would have killed Glenn, I think people would have been a lot more upset. And, of course, Kirkman just decides, I'm going to kill him. But he doesn't just kill him. The way it's depicted in the comic books, you see Negan just he continues to beat his skull in with that bat, and at one point you see Glenn kind of raise up and he's trying to talk, and I think his jaw is half hanging off, and I think that was the most disturbing part to me because he's trying to say something.
Well, I can tell you what happened because I looked it up.
Okay.
The scene you're referencing, he kind of looks up and he's only been hit like twice, and I have to imagine Negan's holding something back because one good shot with a baseball bat to the head you're done. That's if you have any force behind it, you're dead. There's no 2 ways about it. But he's got this depression in his forehead where the impact was made, so it kind of forms a trench, and his jaw's a little unhinged. Eyes are kind of glazed over, and he's stuttering.
It's one of the most
gut-churning scenes I've ever seen. And I've seen some stuff, people.
Wow.
I can sit cold through any Hellraiser. If I felt the inclination, I don't think any of the Hostel movies would bother me, other than being poorly done. Saw never bothered. Something about that whole sequence crawled up inside of me and just sat there. I can't imagine reading that right before. Ugh.
I hate to say, as a 35-year-old man at that point in time, I was traumatized in some way. Hey, give me just one moment. I'm going to cut out here real quick. I got a baby crying, but you go ahead and continue. I'm still listening. I'll be right back, all right?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right.
But, oh, God, yeah, this is one of those things. Anybody out there, if you haven't seen it, I'm actually not going to encourage you to look it up unless you have a strong constitution. Because, like I said, I've seen stuff, and none of it really got inside and kind of sat there and made my stomach churn a little bit. Golly. It absolutely did. And it makes me so worried for the future of that show because they're going to bring in Negan. You have to. They're going to do, probably for at least the first half of the next season, is going to be them dealing with the cannibals at Terminus. And that's what they are. They're cannibals. It's a logical conclusion. Enough things are different. It might not where my mind goes, at least. But it wouldn't shock me at all. And okay, if I were running the show, and I have a slightly evil sense of, I don't mind throwing people into a cliffhanger scenario every now and then. It bugs me that it's overdone, but when done properly, if I were doing it, you spend the entire next scene trying to, getting out of Terminus, dealing with them, working through all that. Maybe you progress a little bit, you meet the guys in Alexandria, and things are starting to look a little bit up. Maybe, Rick and the gang drive off the first bit of the Saviors, which is Negan's gang, by the way. And what they do is they drive around and they find groups and they extort half of all of their supplies. In exchange, they kill all the walkers in the immediate vicinity. It's just extortion. That's all it is.
Yeah, it definitely is, and that continues throughout a good bit of the book itself, where he just continues to extort and push. He pushes Rick to the limit. and ends up, I think, at one point taking his son. He takes Carl, or maybe it's Carl that tries to invade their camp.
Something
I believe
like that.
is what happened.
Well, Negan has this weird thing where he does kind of what Deadpool does, and that he almost breaks the fourth wall. Deadpool became famous for. Negan just has this running kind of inner monologue. I mean, I remember when he's looking at all of his opponents and he's kind of sizing them up, and all we see is we get the thought bubble. He looks at Rick and he goes, "No, I'd be crazy to try and kill the main character. I mean, something like that. I'd be crazy to try and go up against you." He looks at Carl and is like, "No, you're just too interesting to kill off." He's just got. But my thing is, I'd end the next season of The Walking Dead with them captured. Negan strolls up, wielding Lucille, his vampire bat.
Oh boy!
And I just end it with him pointing the bat at the. He does this whole speech, but you've been screwing with me. You've been killing my men. This is not cool. And I mean, you can't have him use the same language he does in the show as he does in the comic.
Every other word's the F-bomb.
Every other word. It's like Tarantino wrote. It's ridiculous.
Oh, yeah.
Samuel L. Jackson thinks this is a bit excessive, all right? But I'd end the next season with him saying, "Well, now, since you've killed all my men, somebody's got to die. And then why not you?" And I'd have him, point the bat at the camera, and we'd cut cold from there. And so we have to come back next season. And
yes, and everybody's going to be on pins and needles, and then they're going to sell some more books. That'd be the way to do it right there. You wanted to maximize the anticipation for sure.
Well, they haven't done a real cliffhanger yet. I mean, even this season. That's one thing that I've enjoyed about The Walking Dead, because I hate modern mainstream television, Big Four network stuff. They always try to end their seasons on a cliffhanger because that creates fan interest and gives them a greater chance to be renewed and all that other stuff. I mean, not that I don't understand it. It bugs me. And They haven't done a real cliffhanger. They ended the first season, kind of bleakly moving forward after the CDC failed. Two ended with the destruction of the farm. This one ended with this one ended with them, but they haven't done a real cliffhanger the way plenty of other series. I mean, the first season of Sherlock over on the BBC ends with Sherlock and their version of Moriarty in kind of a Mexican standoff, and you're wondering who's going to blink first. And that's actually where they ended. I mean, again, cliffhanger.
That's good stuff. Yeah, that's good stuff.
And they haven't done that yet, so I wouldn't be surprised if they went that way.
No, I would love to see something like that on The Walking Dead, where because you're right. The whole Terminus thing, we won't get into that. We're talking Negan. Negan's a badass. Now, have you had a chance to read the most recent issues, the All Out War that I mentioned to you by chance?
I'm pretty sure I know what happens. I mean, this is a guy who decides for fun while waging war on this other settlement that's peaceful because they won't capitulate. He takes walker limbs that have been amputated and straps them to blades so that if they cut the guys they're hitting, they get infected. Yeah. I mean, it's crazy. The guy's nuts.
That's pretty dang evil. I mean, he's figured out. Of course, Rick is trying to compete with this guy, and he's doing a pretty decent job, trying to basically remove him. And he's, of course, they say all out war. I mean, you start seeing both of these guys strategizing on how to kill the other. And he's done this to us, all right. And then you see Negan just, all right, now everybody soak your weapons in zombie blood, and let's head on out, and we'll teach them a lesson. We'll take care of business. But yeah, the last few issues of All Out War, I'm not gonna say anything, but I'll tell you right now, it's interesting to see how it ends. We'll just put it that way, because it's not. I know what I would want to do to somebody that was like that. I mean, he's already gave me nightmares for a couple weeks. You're hoping that this guy is going to get a grenade shoved up his ass, or something horrible is going to happen to him, and it's surprising. We'll just put it that way.
The worst thing about that is, honestly, because when he finally falls, and again, if he dies at the end of that, correct me. I don't think he does, though I might not be as up to date as I'd like.
You're up to date. He doesn't. He does not
yet.
Rick makes a conscious decision to keep his ass alive.
Yeah, but the crazy thing is, if you kill him, if Negan dies, logically speaking, something worse is going to come along.
It's true.
I don't want to see that.
Yeah,
I don't want to see worse than this guy.
The trend so far in the book is that, I mean, you're going to just start progressively. We went from the governor to Negan. I really didn't think you could go much further than the governor, but I think, when Kirkman wrote Negan, his thing was like, okay, we did the governor, and, I want to one-up it. What can I do? And some freaking how he did. Now, if he was to one-up Negan, or Negan, it would be crazy. It would be crazy.
I don't even want to think about what that would look like.
It's going to be interesting to see how they take the book. But, I mean, definitely, I would say right now, Negan is probably he is the villain among independent comics at this point in time. And we can't say he was because the dude's still alive. So,
yeah.
I mean, so we can, I would definitely agree, out of all the villains that we're going to discuss tonight, there's going to be some severe badasses in there, but the one right now that's out there, and I think that's reigning supreme, is definitely Negan.
Yeah, I shudder to think what's going to happen once he strolls on camera, because...
I can't wait. Have they talked about casting this guy yet?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean...
Wow.
The character has to show up, but they've got this whole season left where he's not going to, essentially.
That's true. We got a while.
Yeah, I mean, we got some time, and I don't know. I mean, they might change it so that he doesn't kill Glenn. I mean, at this point...
it wouldn't surprise me. Would not surprise me at all because, Herschel bid it in the show, and I think it was Tyrese that bid it in the book. He's the one that got his head chopped off in the book. So, yeah, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me at all they changed it from Glenn. But, I mean, if you want to hit somebody in the freaking balls, that hit me. And I'll tell you what, I don't know if the guys that are doing the TV show are confident enough to do something like that. Because,
they've killed plenty of other people. If they really wanted to show something, they'd kill Daryl. I mean, that's what would happen. Negan would show up and kill Daryl. Exactly
what I was going to say, because that guy is the heartthrob of all these Walking Dead girlies. He just, everybody loves, all them girls love him.
I love Daryl. Daryl's awesome.
Don't see him a bit in the comic book. He's
coming out in the next.
What I love.
They're actually introducing him in the next issue.
Oh, really? That'll be interesting. That'll be good
I'm pretty sure they've spoiled the cover, and it's his vest with the wings, and him holding a crossbow, looking over his shoulder. Now, here's the thing. I believe that may be an April Fool's prank, because I saw that on April 1st, and I shit you not, I'm like, no way. And then there's an alternate, or not an alternate cover, but a cover of that is very similar. I can't remember one of Negan's bad guys with the crossbow. The dude with the crossbow, there's a cover just like that, and somebody painted the damn wings on the vest. Everybody's like, oh, shit, it's Daryl. I don't know if it's going to be, man. Now, if he does, I'm all about it. Okay, so I might have. But let me say this. They could introduce him very easily. He's a popular enough character, and he fits into that world. I mean, granted, we're getting him in a different way coming into the comic universe, but he could fit right in. I know about 50 girls that would start collecting The Walking Dead as soon as Daryl shows his butt up in freaking the comic book. That's an absolute 100% guarantee. So why not? I can't see why they wouldn't want to if they want to sell some books. Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, no, I haven't heard anything about casting for Negan, so I'm just curious as far as you. Is there anybody off the top of your head that you would like to see play him? Man, I'm not. I listen to you guys do the whole casting thing all the time, and you guys throw some great stuff out there, and I'm not the guy that knows too many actors that would fulfill a role. But I'll give you my guidelines, and this is quite obvious. Okay, I think the dude's got to be pretty big. I would say he'd have to be, when I say big, I mean built. We'll just put it that way. He's got to be built. Yeah, he's a big guy. Yeah. I'd say Negan's pretty ripped. Yeah, he's a pretty big dude. I would probably, he puts me in the mind of like somebody that would be like an Italian gangster
something, or a greaser of some sort, an up-to-date greaser, I guess you would say. So, man, I don't know. Who would give me? You start throwing some names out. I guarantee you something's going to click with me. Who do you got in mind?
I really don't have anyone in mind at the moment, and part of the reason is he's such a horrifyingly fascinating character. I think when I think about okay, who might play him,
They got to play him. They got to play him.
Oh yeah, they do. But I tend to think of guys who I know they're not going to get.
Okay.
Or for one reason or I tend to think of like big name actors who might be able to show up and have some fun with it. I mean, honestly, if you could get, even if you could like alter the physique a little, and I'm pretty sure he could. But if Tom Hiddleston, guy who plays Loki.
Oh yeah.
Again, the big name actor. That's not someone who's necessarily going to be on television. So I'm not sure, but whoever does their casting, they've pulled some obscure names out.
I don't
and
recall.
They've all been good.
I don't recall a big name showing up on that show that I was like, oh yeah, I remember where he was from. Oh, I remember what he was in. Seriously, the only guy I've seen in movies, and I'm sure I'm forgetting a couple, but the only dude I saw in movies was T-Dog. I saw T-Dog in The Blind Side. When I watched The Blind Side, I was like, who's this dude? And I was like, oh, it's freaking T-Dog from The Walking Dead. Only dude I've ever seen in movies that I can think of off the top of my head from that show. But yeah, they've done a great job with casting.
Herschel. I've seen Herschel in movies.
Can't say I have.
He's one of those guys who I have to look up his filmography, but if I start listing off some of the movies he's been in, he's always been, kind of a supporting character, but he's been around for a long time.
I guess I should correct myself. Daryl has been in a few movies, such as Boondock Saints, right? I guess if there's a name, there's a name. So,
but then, Boondock Saints was an underground kind of cult thing. It wasn't a big. You may have recognized his face, but you didn't see Norman Reedus on the credits and go, hell yes, Norman Reedus.
Yeah, that's true.
And then they got Andrew Lincoln playing. The central character is a guy who hadn't done a whole lot of anything and struggled with suppressing his English accent for the episodes, but he got it down. But some of the bigger they've had some decent TV names. One of the guys that Rick gunned down in the bar when he and Herschel were there, and he goes full on like Dirty Harry, guns down those two guys. One of them was just coming off a pretty big stint on True Blood, I think, and then he just gets shot. I don't watch Blood. I know what.
I'm right there with you. I haven't watched the lick of it, but I know people who do.
But I don't know who they're going to get, but at this point, I have faith in their casting. So
I'll put it that way too. I wish I could think. I see the guy in the comics, and of course, what I want to see is a literal translation onto the screen of a big dude, black hair, muscular, leather jacket. Want to whip some ass, but you got to have somebody that can do the acting ability. And I'm sure a lot of people. That narrows it down. I don't envy them trying to figure out, okay, who can play this guy well, and they've done a good job so far. So I'll be interested to see who it's going to be.
If you wanted to take it just a slightly different direction, you could get someone like The Rock, just for kicks.
Oh my gosh! And the ratings did just. If they weren't through the roof already. Everybody's going to start tuning.
Of course, then you got to hate The Rock because he kills somebody, and he's crazy.
Oh, man. I can't say that off the top of my head I've seen him be a bad guy in too many movies.
No,
I've watched
he's
a whole lot, but
he's not doing
the villain ever been a bad guy?
Not off the top of my head. He's not doing the villain thing. You can debate that he falls into kind of the anti-hero role in Faster.
Okay.
But no, he's not really doing the thing right now. The crazy thing is he and the guy who played Shane, I forget his name.
Shoot. I cannot remember his name either. I know who you're talking about. I'm sure everybody else does.
But no, they were in a movie together. Actually, I think Snitch. Shane was in that, so, he knows some people who were in there.
Was it a big role for Shane, or was it just a bit role, or what?
Big-ish.
Okay.
John Berthenol, something like that.
It's a movie I've not seen. I've not seen it.
I just recognized him in the trailer. I'm like, hey, wait, that's Shane.
That's good stuff.
Well, somebody big and crazy like that. If you want, but I don't know. I'm anxious to see where they take it. So I mean, I don't, there's part of me that really doesn't want to see him on screen because I know what's going to happen. By the same token, you can't not play him on screen. It's one of the, you really have to.
Oh, man, and it's going to feel like a pretty, I wonder, how we was talking about the language difference. I mean, in the book, that is part of Negan. That is part of him, and every other word is FFF, and it's going to be, people are probably just going to shit all over it because they're going to feel like, oh, that's not genuine. That's not genuine. What do you expect? It's TV. But, I mean, for Pete's sake. But
I'll say this. You get a good writer, and you can do it. It's a big part of his character, the fact that he feels compelled to swear every other word. But you can get that aspect of him across. You can get the fact that a big part of his personality and his desire is to perpetually shock you, to keep you off balance. You can get that across. It's not easy, and in some cases, having him say the F-bomb every other word is kind of a cheap way to get it across. But
well, what I think, and I can't believe we're analyzing the fact that this guy curses so much, but to me, as part of his character, that's what just makes him feel so. I want to use the word flippant. Like it's like I'm here. I'm the leader of these guys.
Like he's so lighthearted. Nothing. He doesn't take anything seriously.
Yes, and
the whole thing's a joke.
The curses amplify that to me. Like, I'm going to go F some of your wives. I'll be right back. I mean, this guy, not only does he have the gang, but he's screwing everybody's wife that he's head of the gang, which apparently, I mean, he's leader of the pack.
For some reason, he despises rape.
And
one thing that's the only time I ever kind of saw him, again, break character. I referred to him earlier as Deadpool, not just because he breaks the fourth, sort of breaks the fourth wall. I mean, Deadpool absolutely does. But the same kind of, attitude about it. Nothing is serious. Everything's a joke to this guy. It's almost surreal. And then, again, the one time I saw him break that just a little was when one of his crew rapes a woman, and no.
Oh, man. Yep, not happening. Not happening. He took care of that business pretty quick. Well, somewhat,
But be interesting to see where they go with that. And we've now spent an hour talking about just The Walking Dead.
Walking Dead, folks. The Walking Dead. That's all right.
Biggest thing going right now as far as independent comics go. So that's kind of where we went with it. All right. I know you had some other ones that you kind of wanted to bring up, so I'll specifically mention, when we're talking about independent comics and some of the villains and some of the stuff that goes on, if you read some of these, there's a name that's going to pop up as a purveyor of the sick and twisted. That's Alan Moore. I don't know what went on in that guy's childhood.
Man, is he warped. But he writes some of the greatest stories ever. Some of the greatest stuff, and either in the big two, Marvel or DC, when they got stories with him, or independent-wise. He does some great stuff.
Well, he turned Swamp Thing into like a legitimate, interesting character. And the
I remember,
been a joke forever. Alan Moore gets a hold of him, and all of a sudden, no, this guy holds his own against Superman.
Yeah. Wow. Turns things around. And you know how, I'm going to tell you right now, I mentioned this is so funny because it comes back to this. I mentioned earlier how I was so pissed off about something that I've almost wrote 2 letters, and the one being back in 8th grade. It was a little bit later than that. I was probably in 9th or 10th grade now that I think about it. But Alan Moore took over a comic book by the name of Supreme. And Supreme was basically your Superman ripoff. Okay, he had similar powers and vulnerability, but what I loved about Supreme compared to Superman is Supreme didn't have much of a conscience. I can remember one specific issue. I think it was Bloodstrike or something. These guys are trying to. This superhero team is trying to take care of a hostage situation, and Supreme guest stars in their book by basically coming through the roof and grabbing each terrorist and heat beaming all their faces off. And, he was a literal badass. And I love this guy. Alan Moore took over the book. And when I say Superman ripoff prior to Alan Moore, it was even more of a ripoff to me, it felt like. And granted, I didn't understand back then the writing that Alan Moore actually did. I was more along the lines of your adolescent teen wanting to watch blood, guts, gore, and boobs and all that stuff, and I didn't understand what Alan Moore was fucking up with Supreme. What's he doing? We had shit like Supremium, which was your basic ripoff of Kryptonite. Supreme now had a dog. I wish I could remember the name. We had Lady Supreme, Kid Supreme, and it was just felt like it was a throwback to the early days. I wrote a letter. We'll just put it that way. I was so upset at how he did things. I wrote a letter. I've got it somewhere buried in one of these crates down here in the basement. But his intention with the book was, he was trying to write a decent story. And later, I say this later, like maybe 2 or 3 years ago, I ended up getting the trades from the library and reading them again, the Supreme trades. And I got into the story. I understood what the story was about, and he did a great job. Masterful writer. And, just to put a fine point on it, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but it's funny how it all came back to that.
No, I mean, well, the other one I was going to mention, and one that you brought up to me, and one that gets brought up all the time, is what he did with the Miracle Man character and that whole franchise. I mean, it's not very often you get blood raining from the skies.
He did a great job. Now, I'll tell you right now, right up front, I've read maybe 3 or 4 issues of the Miracle Man run that he took over. Now, I did some research today, and the only reason I thought of this was because I have a buddy of mine who collects comics religiously, and he loves to pick up those back key issues. This happened here. The first appearance of the governor, this, that, the other, and hi, Dave, if you're listening. I went and visited his house a couple of years back, and he's like, "You ever read Miracle Man number 15?" And I was like, "Dude, I don't know who the fuck Miracle Man is. I've never heard of that. I don't know who. I had no idea." No, he's like, "You got to check this out." So he showed me the issue, and I read it, and I was like, "Wow, this is some great stuff." One thing that I want to go ahead and I wanted to get across here is, we're talking independent, and you mentioned how independent comics can get away with a little bit more than what the big two can.
Considering what we just discussed from The Walking Dead.
Yeah.
No, rape, mutilation, sodomy.
But we're talking nowadays. Now, back then, I'm sure a lot of people may have heard of the Comics Code Authority, which was just a horrible blight upon some of the stories that could have been written back in the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s. These guys supposedly regulated the way comics could be written. And I was actually on Wikipedia, and they had like a 15-point code of things you could not have in a comic book.
Oh, crazy.
Well, independent comics, what was great about that and what really brought me back in to reading comics was when Image first got done and when they first came out, I don't remember seeing that Comic Code Authority on stuff. And I remember seeing stories that were told with blood and guts and gore and things that were pushing the envelope. That was the thing. And with this Miracle Man run that Alan Moore did, it was something that really. This was in the 80s, I think. Maybe 90s. I could be wrong, but I think this was in the 80s that this was written by Alan Moore. And it was written for. Please do. I know it was written through Eclipse Comics, and we'll just go ahead and I want to go ahead and talk about how
82 was when he took over.
82. All right. Originally, the character was called Marvel Man, and obviously apparently it was being written over in England, and of course for copyright reasons we can't have Marvel Man over here in the States. We got to have Miracle Man. So Miracle Man took over now. Now, if you go to the comic store today, you can pick up an issue of Marvel Man because Marvel has now taken over. And I don't know if they're doing reprints or if they're doing new stories, but there are Marvel Man issues being released now. But anyway, Kid Miracle Man. I mean, this guy. Okay, I'll give you a quick backstory on what happened with Kid Miracle Man. And I'm definitely going off of memory here, so please forgive me if I'm missing some details. But from what I understand, Kid Miracle Man and the Miracle family, we got Miracle Man, Miracle Lady, I believe, Miracle Woman. You got the whole family there. Well, they find out that they had been I believe they had been created as government weapons. Again, please, I might be wrong there, but I do understand. From what I understand, their creator attempted to kill them with an atomic explosion. Kid Miracle Man survives, but he doesn't understand. He doesn't know that anybody else has survived. He thinks he's the only one that survived. He is. It reminds me kind of like a Shazam kind of thing. I don't know if anybody's familiar with Shazam, but basically Shazam's a kid. He says Shazam, big bolt of lightning comes and hits him, and then he becomes this big superhero. Well, it's something very similar with Miracle Man, or Kid Miracle Man. If you say the name Miracle Man, boom, you become a superhero, and he had all these powers. Is Benjamin saying something that is correcting me on something?
No, he just posted a picture of one of the comic issues, so thank you, Benjamin.
Sweet.
For those of you listening, that's Benjamin J. Colon, a fan. He's been a contributor here as well. He does the title art for The Long Road to Ruin, great, very talented artist, and again, a great supporter of this show and The Road to Ruin as well, most of the Radlich and Broadcasting Network stuff. So we're always happy to know that he...
Absolutely. But anyway, so Kid Miracle Man ends up staying in his invulnerable form, or his superhero form, and grows up and matures, doesn't leave that form. Apparently finds out that the rest of the family, or at least Miracle Man, is still alive, and it starts getting this seed of hatred, and just, you can't stand the fact that Miracle Man is still around. Kid Miracle Man is now, like I said, he's grown up. He's the head of this corporate empire, and it's an evil corporate empire. He invites the Miracle Man in his unchanged form, I guess. I wish I could remember his name. But he invites him over to the corporate headquarters, proceeds to tell him, okay, I know who you are, and I'm going to kill. If you mess with me, I'm going to kill your wife. He threatens his wife, and in the process, apparently, kills his secretary just to prove a point to Mr. Miracle Man. And here, I guess obviously a battle ensues. We got Miracle Man versus, Kid Miracle Man versus his mentor Miracle Man, and they're going at it. And Kid Miracle Man, obviously growing up, staying in his powered self, whips Miracle Man's butt. And somehow, as he's gloating over Miracle Man, says the word Miracle Man, and he reverts back to his human form. I believe the kid's name is Johnny Bates. Reverts back to his human form, and at that point in time, obviously the battle's over because his human form is
nothing.
He's
kid.
Yeah, he's nothing, and he's been in limbo this whole time. That Kid Miracle Man has grown up. He's been in limbo this whole time as a kid. And now he's back out in the world, and he kind of understands what Kid Miracle Man has become. It's his alter ego, and he understands that Kid Miracle Man's an evil guy, and he doesn't want that to happen. So the government comes, scoops the guy up, throws him in an institution, okay? So Kid Miracle Man is there in the institution, or I should say Johnny Bates. We'll have to make sure I get his name right.
It's Johnny Bates, correct.
Thank you, okay. So Johnny Bates is in the institution, and I wish I could tell you how much time passes. It couldn't have been too much time, because he then is almost about to get raped by some men in the institution. And to forego being raped, he says the word Miracle Man. And boom, here comes the evil Kid Miracle Man. And, of course, he lays waste to his supposed attackers, and then it's on. It's time to go whip Miracle Man's ass. And a huge battle ensues again, to where half of the population of London, maybe more, I could be wrong.
Something like that.
Was laid to waste in this ensuing battle. Now, here's where cool thing, this is where I was like, oh man, we talk about these graphic scenes in these comics that these villains do, and they impose upon some of the main characters of these stories. He's obviously whipping everybody's butt, and then finally, one of the protagonists, I believe it's a girl. I don't know for sure, but I think she has a teleportation ability, and she teleports something into Kid Miracle Man's head. And at that point in time, in order to save himself, Kid Miracle Man decides he needs to revert back to his form, his own form. says the word Miracle Man, saves his butt, and Johnny Bates is laying there, in a disheveled mess, and Miracle Man comes over, and Johnny's looking up at him. And he says, "He did it. He came out again, and I know what he did." And Miracle Man grabs him up, and it looks like Miracle Man's going to hug him, and instead, I need to see the panel again, but I think he says something like, "I understand," or "I know," or something like that. And then you just see blood come up over Miracle Man's face. He apparently, I don't know what, he just squeezed him to death or what, but he killed this young kid, so this atrocity would not happen again. And that, to me, again, we're talking about Alan Moore, who writes some great stories. We're talking the 80s here, folks. And if you're reading comics at that point in time, there's few things that you've read. Now, if you're an independent comic guy, you might have read something, but there's few things that you've read that have really, spoke to you and grabbed you at that point in time. And I'm sure it was hot back then, just like it is today. We're still talking about it. We're close to 30 years now since that's happened. And but again, a great story, a villain. I mean, I think what Alan Moore was trying to get across with these stories was the fact that if superheroes were on Earth, this is kind of like what they would do. And if I remember correctly, Miracle Man was working towards taking over the world for the betterment of humanity. But again,
which actually he wound up doing following having to kill Kid Miracle Man, because, hey, look, if this could happen, imagine if we weren't here. Type of pretense. He establishes the global utopia under his. Alan Moore was big into the oppressive regime that enforced order through violence. It's a chronic theme in his work. It's representative of his political views. I mean, one of my favorite graphic novels of all time deals like almost exclusively with that, and that's V for Vendetta.
Oh yes.
In this case, instead of Supreme Chancellor Adam Sutler, you have omnipotent Miracle Man. So
Yes.
Things are a little bit, but no, yeah, they use that as a pretense for establishing their government. But yeah, it's absolutely crazy the amount of carnage that was caused by that. And one of the reasons you like independent comics, you can push things, and maybe you push too far sometimes. Not everyone likes it, but having a bit more freedom as an artist is so much more rewarding than, okay, you can't have any of these 15 things, and we're going to object to some of the tone and to the tone in some of your stuff as well. So yeah, but have you read V?
No, I can remember. I've seen the movie. I don't know if I don't believe I've read anything of it. Obviously, I know that is a comic, but I have not. I've not had a chance to read that yet. And of course, I've heard it's highly touted amongst a lot of people that I've talked to.
It's good. It's another one of those things where they change. There are subtleties that change from movie to comic. So if you understand that, well, there's a great deal of similarity, and obviously, the whole thing is inspired by it and whatnot. There are some, contextual differences. A few things happen differently. They're different, and I enjoy both of them. But again, they are different entities in that sense. So, if you have the time and the inclination, I'd encourage you to read it. But I don't know. I have a kind of an odd fascination with, from time to time, like the supreme government leader who's just, kind of an insecure human. And Moore does that very well with V and the great Adam Hurt. I believe it's Adam Hurt. John Hurt. Great John Hurt plays Adam Sutler in the film version, does a fantastic job. Just enough kind of, similarities to Adolf Hitler to understand that you get the comparison without having to go full bore into all of the iconography and everything. But yeah, okay. The last one that I really wanted to touch on was one of the bigger titles to come out of the 90s. I'm going to say 90s. I hope I'm right, because otherwise I look like a complete idiot. But I wanted to touch briefly on because Spawn was done under I think it was the Image title.
Yeah. That title, and you're right, it was the 90s. Image broke loose. Or I say Image broke loose. They were created, I believe, in '92. Again, that whole line when Image broke loose. We're talking, and I'll just do a brief kind of a history lesson. And a lot of you people who are listening already know this, but Image was made up of some of the greatest artists of the 80s and 90s that Marvel had seen, I know for sure. We're talking Todd McFarlane, which is your creator of Spawn. We're talking Savage Dragon, which was Eric Larson. We've got Jim Lee, who I think he's doing all right for himself right now. He's up there in D.C., I believe. He's climbed the corporate ladder. Jim Lee brought over Wildcats, who was I remember finding out that I had the first issue that one of the first issues that he penciled for Marvel, which was an X-Men issue, and I loved his pencils. And when you saw him do X-Men, it was just beautiful. You knew there was talent there. McFarlane the same way. When you saw Todd McFarlane and the way he did pencils, drew these characters was just beautiful. Some of the other artists that came across, there was Rob Liefeld of X-Force fame from Marvel. He come over and did Youngblood, and those are the main players. When I first saw, I think my first ever Image issue was an issue of Pitt, and I guarantee, not a whole lot of people are going to know who Pitt is, but Dale Keown was an artist, and he came over along with him, was drawing some beautiful stuff, had a character by the name of Pitt. And what was awesome about Image, and the core reason behind Image, were these artists were upset with Marvel on how, they were making a lot of money off of these guys' creation. And they said, look, we want to own our own stuff. We want to have our own properties out there making money for us, and we don't want to have our properties making money for Corporation A or Corporation. So they created Image as an outlet for these people to come over and do their own creations. Each book is owned by that artist and gets the money off of that book. Spawn comes out, and Spawn #1 is practically, I don't know if do you own, and I'm asking, I don't know if you collect comics, and I know you read, but do you have any comics yourself?
Collect, no, I don't collect any.
It wouldn't surprise me, though. It wouldn't surprise me, though, if you had a Spawn #1 accidentally underneath your sofa or something like that, because it was the most widely publicized comic, and people were just clamoring for that when that first came out. And McFarlane on pencils was just, it was just so beautiful. But talking about some of the villains that were in that book.
It's okay. I don't need to have one because apparently Benjamin J. Cologne has 2 of them. So he's got my reserve copy for me.
Oh, that's some great stuff. It was amazing. And if you ever hear somebody talk about the comic book bust or bubble, that burst where you had all these chromium covers and all this crap coming in. Unfortunately, in my life, I tie Image into a lot of that. Now, granted, Marvel and DC were big contributors to it. But I went to my buddy's house. I was talking about Dave. I went to my buddy's house there a while back, and we were just looking through. He's got all these comics, and he's like, he's like, check this out. And I looked at, and I said, how cool, you got a Spawn #1. He's like, yeah, I got 3 more. You want one? He gave me one. I never owned one up to that point. So, but again, that's.
I got to apologize briefly for the dogs.
That's all right with me. I got crying babies upstairs, so as long as the kids ain't coming through for me, ain't coming through the microphone, I guess we're okay. Caleb's come running down here.
Still looking for the Prothean bacon, I assume.
Dude, it doesn't stop either. I can correct him 1,000 times and be like, man, it's the beacon. I know, Dad, I got to find that piece of bacon. And I'm like, all right.
I'll figure it out.
We'll let him play. He continually plays that level over and over and over. And if you've ever seen me talk about my son, he just drives things into the ground. And it continually, it's bacon, it's the bacon, the bacon, the bacon. And it's like, can you please put the damn Lego game in? Please stop playing Mass Effect. But all right, back to Spawn. I didn't mean to interrupt you there and go on a history lesson, a personal Jesse Starcher rant there. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. It was a really interesting comic in that it was very well done, you had some really powerful characters, and then you had some really solid villains. I mean, you had the Violator, who was really awesome. You had who's the ruler of hell? Isn't it Malbolgia? That's their version of the devil, essentially?
Yes. Yes.
You had really great characters for them to play around with, and I remember being supremely disappointed in the film because John Leguizamo was now a fat clown, and that's supposed to be the Violator.
Yeah, it was. When you look at the Spawn as a book, Spawn is. I mean, you're looking at that as Spawn is coming from hell. Your immediate thought is, oh well, anything from hell's got to be bad. And well, obviously, you read the book and you see that this is Spawn is a guy who was tragically he was murdered in his previous life, went down to hell, come back up, and of course he's disfigured, horrible looking, burnt crisp of a wiener looking guy, and but of course his costume is cool as hell. And I can remember reading those first issues as he's learning how his costume can do shit by itself, and he learns how to control that. But the premise behind Spawn is that he is a hell spawn, and his purpose is to lead. I believe his purpose is to lead the armies of hell, and take over the world. So what the Violator talk about the Violator's purpose is to groom this hell spawn into becoming this leader. Al Simmons, Spawn. He wants nothing to do with that. What he wants to do is he wants to get back to his kid, and he wants to get back to his wife. And I remember, sadly, I don't think I've read much past probably issue 20 or so of Spawn, but, I can remember, a big thing there in the early issues was him trying to figure out how he died. And then it gets revealed how he died, which I thought was pretty interesting. He was killed by another superhero, by the name of Chapel, and Chapel was a member of Youngblood. And again, we're kind of scraping the bottom of knowledge here when it comes to. Not a whole lot of people know much about these unless they're following their Youngblood back in the 90s and stuff like that. But Chapel was one. He was one badass looking guy too. That's one thing you could say about a lot of these characters from Image when they first started out. They looked freaking awesome. Chapel, big dude, and a skull for a face, all right? Or skull. It looked like skull paint until I realized on the wiki that actually his face was removed and somebody grafted a skin back onto his face in the shape of a skull. And I was like, whoa, that's pretty hardcore. But anyway, another superhero killed Al Simmons, and that's how you found out that he was why he died. I can remember that mystery being resolved, and everybody was like, who killed Spawn? Who killed Spawn? And you find out it wasn't a villain. It was actually another superhero / anti-hero, I guess you would say. But
Image was full of those, but good guy.
Oh yeah,
he's a good guy.
That's how they start. I mean, a lot with it being like this, and we're talking early '90s. We know the anti-hero craze probably was getting started, and if it not started, I mean, people were clamoring for Venom back then. Venom was, he's a horrible character, and I know we're going into Marvel here, but he was a horrible character, but everybody loved him, and you started seeing a lot more of that pop up around here. You got your anti-heroes, you got your guys doing bad things, and you've had that for quite a while, but it really started getting prevalent in the early '90s that I can remember. But anyway, yeah, Spawn was some good stuff. And Violator, and like I said, if you want to count, I don't even know if you can count Angela as a villain. I don't know if you remember Angela at all. And I can't say I know too much about her history, but she was an angel. But it seemed like her and Spawn were always at odds, and they were always fighting each other.
If my research holds up and my memory of said research serves me, she knows that he's fated to wind up destroying the world, and she constantly tries to kill him to prevent it.
Gotcha. All right. Very cool. Well, any others from Spawn that you can think of off the top of your head?
No. Again, I'm not as knowledgeable about Spawn as maybe I should be, so nothing else from there comes off the top of my head. But I was so disappointed between John Leguizamo, the fat clown, and Poor Martin Sheen.
The visual effects, I can remember that was the big thing for me, was I was like, okay, this is going to be some awesome visual effects in this movie. And, dude, I've watched it once, and that was probably 2 years after it came out. Never seen it since. All I can remember from that movie, to be honest, I can't even remember the actors. You're saying Martin Sheen was in this, and I'm like, I don't even freaking remember him.
Oh, I can
remember
say
that.
the main three. Because you had John Leguizamo was the fat clown who turned into the Violator. Michael J. White, who played Al Simmons, Spawn.
Okay.
And Martin Sheen, who was in charge of the private security company that Simmons worked for that had him killed and went on to become president.
Wow. The only thing I can remember from that movie, and I guarantee it's probably because of the trailer, because that was crammed down a lot of people's throats, was Spawn coming through the roof and the cape billowing. And that's the only thing I can remember from that movie. That is the only thing.
Oh, yeah. Frank Welker was doing a very poor voice for their version of Malbolgia.
The Dr. Claw voice.
Yeah. Oh, God. It's so sad when you see these awesome villainous characters. No, we don't, not treated properly. Nothing is done correctly. That was my big gripe with, I actually haven't seen the second Ghost Rider movie, but the first one.
Ooh.
Okay, I accept that you want to take Mephistopheles in a slightly different direction. The old guy who's got, okay, Mephistopheles doesn't have to be, over the top and giant demon. Blackheart kind of does. He's not a whiny kid trying to get out from under his dad. He's an abomination.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Well, let me speak on
different subject.
Let me speak on Chapel one more time, because to me, he came across. I know I said as an anti-hero. He actually becomes quite the villain, as a matter of fact. Chapel was the one that killed Al Simmons. He finds out, tries to find out what the source of Spawn is, and he hunts him and tries to find out what the secret. I'm reading this from the wiki. Secret of his resurrection. Now, he finds out about how the Hellspawn process works and how the devil's making these Hellspawns. So he's like, well, screw it. He's like, I'd like to become one. So
like a good idea.
His only way, and I remember reading this comic, the only way that he could do that to guarantee his trek to hell, he puts the gun up to his head and blows his own brains out. And I remember reading after that he becomes, they did a whole story arc there in Image where Chapel becomes like a lord in hell. Instead of becoming a hellspawn, he becomes a lord. I remember reading, I thought he was the actual devil himself, and I was like, okay, this guy's a badass. He kills himself and he just goes down, and then he overthrows hell. Okay, he's a pretty big badass. But he's one Image character that went from hero, anti-hero to villain, I think, pretty easily. Another one I wanted to bring up was Overlord, which this was the main baddie in Savage Dragon. Now, are you familiar with any Savage Dragon at all?
I've heard the name. I've seen a couple. I'm not familiar with the story or any of that, so go ahead and give me the abbreviated version. Yeah,
well, Savage Dragon, he's a Chicago cop. He is a dragon. When he first came out, not too many people knew about his origins, but his main baddie was a guy by the name of Overlord, and I'll just go ahead. We'll make this quick. All you need to do is think of imagine Dr. Doom, okay, minus the magic, at least at the beginning, minus the magic, and throw in a little bit of Godfather 2 in there, because he was a guy by the name of Seghetti, I believe his name. So he's like an Italian mob lord. It's kind of what I got, a crime lord, and he got a suit made up for him by a cybernetic genius, and he looks. When I say Dr. Doom, he looks very much like Dr. Doom. But in the first few issues of Savage Dragon, him and Savage Dragon go at it, and I can remember a few panels really specifically where Overlord basically bests Savage Dragon. Now, Savage Dragon is not anyone to sneeze at. He's a pretty big dude, and he's near, I wouldn't say invulnerable or anything, but he's pretty tough to try and injure. And I could just remember Overlord waylaying him and sending his ass off of a building, and Savage Dragon landing on a church spire, and he's just kind of stuck there. And there's the end of the issue, is Savage Dragon just kind of stuck on a church spire. And but anyway, he was a big baddie in my day, and I can from Image that I can remember. Nothing that too many people won't be like, oh, Overlord, yeah, man, he was badass, but he was probably big in that.
Well, hey, some of the best ones might fly under the radar from time to time, and if it's what speaks to you, by all means, I'm actually gonna have to try and catch up on that. I mean, until I actually sat down a couple of weeks ago, several, now that I think about it, until I sat down here with Pat Mullen and we talked about Thor, I had no idea who Gore the God Butcher was.
Oh yeah, some good stuff.
And it turns out, hey, look, imagine if you loosened a few more screws in this giant creature and then gave it, you have this, this monstrous creature. Now give it the personality of Hannibal Lecter with a couple of screws loose.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
I'm sold. I'm down. And I mean, no, I can't talk with too many people about it. Like, who? No, man. Awesome bag. Awesome. So if.
Yep.
So if that's your Overlord, and he's just he causes a problem. Hey, by all means, I'm gonna have to look into that. I've heard some good things about Savage Dragon, so you have to see what I can do.
We're talking. What are we talking? 92 they came out, or 92. So we're at 22 years. That comic's still going on, just like so is Spawn. Now that's a testament, because a lot of those books. I was talking about Supreme earlier, Wildcats, obviously, that got absorbed. I don't even know if that's still going on over in D.C. or not, but those two books are still going strong. And I can remember Eric Larson, I mean, that guy is a machine. The dude, the dude's been putting out issues left and right. I've always loved Savage Dragon. That was definitely a part of my childhood for sure. But and Spawn, of course, I don't think McFarlane's doing much on Spawn, but the book is still going. Oeric Larson is, I think, still turning Savage Dragon out 22 years later.
Crazy.
But that's it, man. That's all I have. Those are the ones that I'm bringing back from my childhood and bringing up.
I think that's pretty much all the ones I wanted to talk about. I almost forgot Preacher.
Oh yeah,
this is the other kind of main one I wanted to talk about. And let me say this: I mean, this is a comic that it's a I don't want to say limited issue or what. It's a self-contained story. Ended its run early 2000? I forget off the top of my head.
I think it went 60 issues. 60-some issues, I believe. And I think you're right. It started in the mid-90s, I believe. I remember reading one of the first few issues, and this guy had found some critical information on the internet. I was like, that must have been some big
and he had to go.
Then.
No, the fun part was he had to find a location that had access to the internet.
yeah, and sit there. He probably went to the public library. That's where I would have went to, probably.
Oh, not in God. That's part of that set, in the south of Texas. I mean, I imagine there are parts of Texas in the 90s. You had to really travel to get the internet.
Man, we're gonna this book. I mean, I can't believe we almost didn't touch on it. It almost slipped my mind. I can't believe I forgot about it. This book right here. I've always heard people talking about Preacher, and I started reading this book earlier this year, I think. And the only reason I picked it up, I remember, as I said, I've heard everybody talk about it, but then I started seeing the buzz about a certain network picking up the show.
Well,
I was like,
that's been discussed before. Let me say this, as far as Preacher goes. Fans of the comic have had to endure for years. Well, this film studio was thinking about making it. HBO wants it as a series. I mean, all the fans of this material are like, oh man, maybe if we could, see it on the big, see it brought to life, and it keeps falling into one form of development hell after the other, and it just, various studios were, they're like, let's buy the option. People have talked about this. It's supposed to be pretty good. I feel like they buy the option, read the material, and go, oh, hell no. We can't put this out. Janet Lange
yes.
HBO was talking about doing a series, and HBO seems to have backed off. And the most recent bit of news on that front is AMC has picked up the option.
Yeah.
So, and much as I have faith in AMC doing, being willing to do some stuff, there is some seriously screwed up stuff that goes on in that book.
Oh my gosh. I mean,
let's start off with the obvious. Anything that has the guts to cast God as the villain.
we're going to push the envelope just a little bit, and we're going to toss a few things might not be used to here. How about God's the villain, and everybody shits their pants?
Narcissistic, self-involved, dictatorial jerk.
Now, I think obviously there's going to be a definite following for this movie, or excuse me, for this show.
I don't even know what they're going to wind up calling. They're going to have to redub, like, depending on where this gets aired in the world, because they have a character named, and let me apologize if this is to anyone listening overseas, or if this offends you. They have a character called
Arseface. Oh, man.
Who looks that way because he failed to commit suicide. He tried to do what Kurt Cobain did, and for anyone out there, that's a bad idea, first. But he decided to try it because there's actually is like a church of Kurt Cobain, and
wow.
I don't care for Nirvana, so I don't get it, but that's just me. But yeah, he and his friend formed a suicide pact, and they're going to do it like Kurt did, which is a small gauge shot, I think a 410 shotgun, I think. Through the mouth. Well, he puts it under his chin instead of through his mouth and doesn't finish the job.
Hence our face.
Yeah,
man, and I think if I remember correctly, reading that book, that was the first thing that I was like, whoa, wait a second, what am I looking at here? Oh no, that's not what I'm seeing. Oh man, it's again. Independent comics pushing the envelope and trying to go right for that jugular and getting you to go, whoa, wait a second, and notice what's going on. Our space, absolutely grabbed my attention, and I can just remember seeing that and taking pause, and I can seriously remember closing the book and opening it back up again just to make sure he's still there, because I couldn't believe what I was seeing. But
you've also got Hair Star, which, if you get into it, he runs the rail organization. That poor, you mentioned before what happened to the governor.
Yeah.
Imagine that brought out over the entire series. It seems like every time this guy shows up, after he appears, he shows up and he loses something. He loses a leg, he loses genitals, he loses an arm. I mean, every time he shows up throughout the course of an issue, by the end of it, some piece of his anatomy is no longer attached to him.
Oh, not only that, but I'm at the point right now, and I believe this is the guy that somebody called the sex detectives? Was that
Something
the name?
Like that.
Where they showed up and he was in the back alley expecting it to be a prostitute, I believe, when in fact it ended up being two big guys, and that's he lost that too. He wasn't. he lost that too. I don't know what you'd call that, but he lost it. And although he seemed, oh my, that's a nice picture, Benjamin. Wow. He finally. Let me look at that. That is crazy.
Yeah, and that's what we have to look forward to on it.
I'm not that far in the book yet, but I cannot wait. That, like I said, I think I'm up to issue 22, I think. So I'm going through it.
A lot of fun stuff still to come.
And that's what everybody's saying. Everybody's like, oh, it gets better. It gets better. And after I think the second story arc, where I think the biggest, so far, and what I've read so far, the biggest baddie that I've read so far was his grandmother. And she was, and of course, I think it was his uncle. I don't know if it was his uncle or his cousin. I can't remember. But, we got the grandmother that is completely, absolutely nuts. We got his uncle who is, he's there for the cause and, just takes any advantage that he can to beat the shit out of somebody. And then we had the other guy. I wish I could remember the relation here, but he was always screwing animals and just doing all sorts of crazy stuff. But that grandmother had such a warped sense of punishment for this kid. And I can remember, he's talking about, I think he's telling his girlfriend about how, some of the stuff they did to him back in the day, where they ended up, like, killing his one-eyed best friend, and then using said best friend to weigh down the coffin that they stuffed him in under the water to teach him a lesson. And I guess to the people that don't know, what they do to young Jesse Custer when the grandmother, when he's staying at his grandmother's, and mind you, his grandmother pretty much approved for that family to kill Jesse's father.
She rules the roost.
She pretty much can be responsible, although she didn't pull the trigger, of killing Jesse's father. And therefore, Jesse's staying with his mom at his grandmother's on that ranch or whatever. And when she would teach a lesson, she would take young Jesse Custer and put him in a coffin. But she wouldn't just put him in a coffin. She would then take said coffin and run a tube so the guy can get so the kid could get some air, take said coffin to the lake, and then put the coffin down in the lake, and he would stay down there for days. And that was to teach him a lesson, and it was just so warped. And then, of course, when they killed his best friend and then used his best friend's dead body to weigh the coffin down after they put him back in it, I was just like, man, this lady's got to go. And she goes. But again, she's, so far, that's as far as I've gotten. And I could see, I think God has made a couple appearances so far, but not in the sense that, he's coming right out. And like you said,
have you met the Saint of Killers yet?
Yes, Saint of Killers, he was early on. He was he was a badass, that's for sure.
Oh, he's all kinds of awesome in a, psychotic, I wish to, my rage encompasses everything sort of way.
Oh, nice. Very nice. So, okay, so obviously we got God as the bad guy here.
Kind of, yeah.
Okay, is there any spectacular feats? Spoil anything you want to for me here. I want to read the books, but is there other stuff that shows up here that are just, obviously Airstar gets a few things happen to him. Are there any other big baddies that show up, or any other big instances in this book that I can expect?
There's a few other. I don't remember anything specific. I mean, you run into all kinds of fun stuff. The Irish vampire is pretty fun. Cassidy.
Oh yeah, Cassidy. Yes.
He winds up being kind of a bad guy.
And I remember, here's the thing with spoilers. I obviously right now I don't care. We've already established that. But what's funny is, if there's a spoiler and I try not to pay attention to it, I end up somehow paying attention to it anyway. And I'm pointing my finger at Patrick Mullen for saying one word when we were talking Preacher on one of those Facebook threads. All he said was Cassidy. I'm like, oh, fuck. I was like, that's what I'm going to expect. But again, this book is how old? You said 2000s it ended? I think the moratorium is passed.
Oh, yeah. I get my more. Of course, by that logic, I should have no problem spoiling Game of Thrones because the first book came out in the mid '80s. The first book is that old. It's early '90s. I think it's almost as old as I am.
Yeah.
Of course, apparently I spoiled The Hobbit for somebody.
I watched that cartoon back in when I was in 6th or 7th grade, and I think that cartoon at that point in time, this is the cartoon of The Hobbit, was so everybody should have seen that. But you spoiled it for him. Way to go, Winfree.
I can't remember the specific. I remember that I did it. I don't remember the whole circumstance. The discussions or anything. But talking with because we were just discussing where you would take the third movie, because a lot of people forget kind of what happened, the whole narrative of The Hobbit. So I was talking with someone well, okay, but Smaug's going to wreck the city, and then, what are we going to do after that? And my response was, well, you've got that, you got the rebuilding, then you have the armies gathering, the Battle of Five Armies, the death of Thorin Oakenshield, Bilbo returning home and fighting off all of his relatives who were trying to auction off. There's plenty of stuff to put in there, and somebody was like, Thorin dies? That book came out in the 50s or something. I'm not going to have Thor and Oakenshield. The dragon dies. Thorin dies. I'm going to apologize.
You can't hold that against it.
Oh,
no,
yeah. I didn't feel bad about it. I couldn't help but laugh about it. Like, you didn't know that Thorin Oakenshield dies in The Hobbit, or did you just gloss over you? Or did you just gloss over, remembering what happened then? Because people tend to remember certain aspects of it. Not that I blame them. Tolkien's writing is dense at times and serves very little purpose from time to time. But
a thick tome. Indeed.
I would rather reread Heart of Darkness than try to plow my way through certain works of J.R.R. Tolkien.
Oh.
And I spent, if you've never read it, Heart of Darkness is not a long book, but it's a physical chore to read because it's dense and interesting, and I'd rather reread that. So that's where I stand as far as those things go. But yeah, Cassidy winds up going a little bit to the dark side. Gets a bit of redemption at the end, so good for him, redeeming qualities. But no one else. I mean, again, God is kind of your adversary. Some of the angels show up. I mean, there's a bunch of little guys along the way, summarily dealt with.
And we're talking, this is Garth Ennis, if I remember correctly, right? Garth Ennis was writing this. Let me double check, make sure. He's a great writer. Again, you got these independent comics, you want to push the envelope, and these guys are there to do it. And Garth Ennis has done some great work, for, I think, he wrote some Punisher stuff. I believe, I want to say that he wrote Welcome Back Frank or Welcome Home Frank. I can't remember which one that is, but it's a critically acclaimed Punisher story. Punisher's a great character, don't get me wrong, but it's hard to write stories that are interesting for a guy that started out in his early days shooting crack dealers and going up against crime, and but he did a great job in establishing the character for the Punisher. So, but yeah, Garth Ennis, great writer, and it's awesome. This is Vertigo we're talking here, which is, I think, a subset of DC, but it's their mature line. And they did some stuff. Sorry, reading Benjamin stuff here. But anyway, is he? Oh, okay, all right, sweet. Garth Ennis wrote pretty much all the Punisher stories worth reading for a solid 10+ years after Preacher ended. Okay, very good. But yeah, as for Preacher, man, this is going to be. It's a great story so far that I've read. Let me tell you how I came across the books. This is a story I love to share. I do a lot of auctions, and every once in a while, if you're paying attention to stuff on Facebook, I'm talking about what I got at auctions. Well, I went to an auction last year. I think it was in July, and I ended up getting a big box of books. And I got a lot of cool stuff in there for really, really cheap. And when it all came down and broke down to it, I think I paid approximately 3 cents a book. And I had over I think close to 200 comic books we're talking. And 2 of those were the first 2 trades of Preacher. And they've been sitting upstairs for a good 6 or 7 months until I finally decided to go and pick them up, after hearing all this buzz. And like I said, now I've got the other ones. Somebody help me get on the internet. Just put it that way.
Yeah, good old internets.
Good old internet.
All right, just a quick heads up. We've got 6 minutes of live time left, so to anyone listening live, thank you very much for doing so. We're probably going to go just a bit over, so you might just miss the plugs, but be sure to come back. I'll let everyone know when the whole show is done and submitted and everything. You can come back and listen to the whole overrun, depending on how long it goes. So, again, thanks for listening live. And, again, we might end on time, give or take, so depending on anything else that comes up. But I think that's everything I had that I wanted to touch on as far as some of the really famous kind of evil characters that came out of independent comics. And if that's everything you wanted to touch on specifically as far as main characters go, I think we're about done.
Yeah, I think we covered as much as we could. So you're at the end of you're finalizing your chapter here in this long trek, 3-month trek of doing comic book villains. All right.
Yep.
Now I'm gonna run past the characters that we did villains of, and I've got a few questions for you here, if you wouldn't mind indulging us.
By all means.
All right. Okay. So we we started out with X-Men back in February. So we discussed the villains of the X-Men. And then I believe there was some controversy. We went to the Joker. And then we went to Dr. Doom. And I think we had, I don't know if it was in the middle there, we did have a debate, correct?
No, it was jokingly just thought about. The closest we wound up getting to it was, if you want a rough approximation of what that would have gone like, listen to the Radulich and Broadcasting Network's review of The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Only instead of Mark saying what he likes about the movie and Pat poking fun at it, imagine Mark trying to explain what about the Joker is so awesome and Pat making fun of the Joker. So that's how it would have gone. So you can listen to that, and that's the crux of how it would have gone. We banded the idea around it never.
Keeping them separate was probably a good idea. So we covered the Joker, then we hit Dr. Doom, and then we covered Spider-Man. That was part one because somebody did not want to touch on the symbiotes at that point in time. Then we did the rest of Batman's rogues. Then we went back. We had the Evil Ginger on, I believe, and we had the mandated reporter to discuss Venom versus Carnage and Spider-Man the Symbiote. All right. Then we got Green Lantern, which I think we had Sean Comer and Gavin Napier on.
Gavin did show up for the last bit of that podcast. It was a great pleasure to have him on.
Absolutely. We had Thor, which was Patrick Mullen, and indulging us with some great Odin knowledge and Asgardian tomes. Then we got The Flash, which I think Pat made it back for that one too, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Then we had Mark Radulich.
Carried that entire podcast.
Then we had Iron Man, which was Mark Radulich again. We brought him in. Then we had Wonder Woman, which Teasley came on and read us a nice Wikipedia entry for every one of them, I believe.
And between the two of us, we did that, and we got hey, come on, she had the blue snowman. We had to have Teasley on.
Oh my gosh, I remember that. Then Teasley came back and he tackled somewhat of a. I mean, we're going to call them comic. We're going to call them a comic book. This is the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Mm-hmm. And then last week, I believe it was Captain America, and we're finishing up on independent comic books this week.
Yep.
So, all right. So all those that I just listed.
Man, that just sounds exhausting.
It does, man. I honestly. First off, let me give you kudos because you've gone above and beyond and kept me entertained for the last 3 months. I can remember sitting in the hotel when you guys were doing the symbiotes, and I was listening live, and, I was just like, how much better can it get? I'm laying in a hotel listening to people talk about comic books. Wonderful, wonderful time, and you've done a great job keeping us in it for the past 3 months. So out of all those, you're very welcome. Out of all those that I've listed, okay, that you guys have covered, which one of those do you think had the most interesting rogues gallery?
Interesting. Once I got it, I hate to be cliche, I probably got to go with Batman, just because you have not just the interesting character from Batman, but just the depth of talent. So in his rogues gallery, the fact that a couple of guys running a cartoon show could decide, Mr. Freeze should be taken seriously, and he goes from a jokey kind of guy who I believe had been killed off by the Joker, kind of as an ancillary action, to one of the most tragic and interesting and poignant characters in the franchise. It's the depth that he has. You can go all the way down to the C category of Batman villain, and you can still find some compelling stuff there. So I probably top to bottom Batman. Okay, that is definitely. I'd probably, if it was up to me, I'd probably go the same route. I mean, it's a lot of history there too, and they've had a lot of time to kind of fine tune those villains and get some great stories out there. So I absolutely understand. So, all right, next question. Very similar to the first, but instead of the most interesting rogues gallery, who do you think had the lamest rogues gallery? Martian Manhunter, because I didn't even get to him. He was like the final guy on the page. You're like, I'm not. We don't need to do this one. Something like that. No, of the ones I did, honestly, probably Wonder Woman. The cadre of villains that she has is just, there are some good ones, there are some interesting ones, but the fact that her main kind of arch nemesis is Cheetah, and everything else. Yeah, so whenever Wonder Woman shows up, you have an Injustice League or any gang that decides to take on the Justice League, they always get Cheetah, who is the main arch nemesis of Wonder Woman. Everyone else gets second or third, and that's just kind of where Cheetah is as a character. So she probably has the weakest right now. She could have a much better. There's a lot of interesting character there for Wonder Woman that could be explored, but on the whole, probably she has my perspective.
Well, you're going to need, and this ties into the meaning of this show. You're going to need, when we do this Wonder Woman movie with our most celebrated actress Gal Gadot. We're going to who's going to be the you're going to need a good villain to
carry that movie. Look, Gal Gadot does not have the star power or the charisma from what I've seen. I'll caveat this. From what I've seen, I've been surprised in the past. I will be surprised in the future. That's the nature of how these things go. From what I've seen, whoever is cast as her primary villain for that movie is going to bear the brunt of carrying it.
No.
In kind of the same way, and this is an odd thing to say, but for as much as, the first Thor movie is about Thor and his journey, Tom Hiddleston as Loki carries the bulk of he's the interesting one. He's the more diverse one. It's on his shoulders that a fair amount of that film falls. And Chris Hemsworth is a very talented and charismatic actor. Gal Gadot, from everything I've seen, is not. So whoever is her nemesis in that movie has to be, they're going to carry it. It's going to fall more on their shoulders than on hers. I have no idea how you're going to do it. I honestly...
It's going to be a rough one. I cannot wait to hear you guys cover that one on
we'll do something.
Between you guys do the movie. Yeah, I hear you. All right, last question. Okay, and you kind of touched on this, which I might have an idea what your answer is. I might be surprised. But were there any villains that you did not know about before, and you kind of mentioned this already, that you felt a need to maybe grab a few of the books that the character was in or featured?
You're right. I did already mention this, and the first one primarily is Gore the God Butcher. There's something within human nature, I think, that is fascinated by the concept of deicide. And to have a character like him, whose sole purpose in life is to kill all the gods that he can find and to consume them and become stronger and I had no idea who that was. I knew as far as going into the Thor podcast with Pat, I knew, okay, we got to touch on the Enchantress, Scourge, Loki, probably Destroyer. We can get Thanos in there because he and Thor have gone one-on-one in the past. And when we were prepping for it, Pat mentioned in passing, I think it was on Facebook or something, and we have to talk about Gore the God Butcher. Who? I couldn't find I could not find anything on him from some of my conventional searches. So I, kind of the last minute, I found some of his stuff. Got some visuals on him, got a little bit of his story, and then with my basic interest there, then Pat came in and just sold the hell out of it.
Yeah, he did.
But from a character that I didn't know existed, to then go and be one of I'm enthralled by what he does and where they took him. Nothing that I did with any of these others comes close.
Awesome, very cool. Well, once again, you did a tremendous job the last 3 months. I can tell you that I'm thankful for what you did, and I know there's a few others out there that listen to the show that are. It's nice to be able to know. Yeah, it's nice to be able to know you can go back. Hey, I was on a podcast, or I know a podcast. As a matter of fact, the Captain America one, I tried to share to a guy who was watching Captain America that night. He's like, I'm gonna sit there. He's like, I'm a big comic book nerd. I'm gonna sit down and watch the show. And I'm like, hey. So there's a guy that's covering Captain America villains. You might want to check it out. There's a lot of people out there that I know enjoy the show, and we appreciate especially the comic book turn you did the last few months, and now on to bigger and better things. You're closing the chapter, but you're going to come back and do a chapter 2 at some point. Is that correct?
Oh, yeah. Oh, okay. I can't not. When I consider what I've covered so far, you mentioned it's been 3 months. I did the major players for the Avengers and the Justice League, and I did the X-Men. Mm-hmm. But by the same token, consider how much I left off. It's staggering in some ways, the amount of, maybe not A-list, 100% selling all stuff all the time. I mean, even the X-Men, if I wanted to, I could go back and like specifically single out members of the X-Men universe and their specific villains, because I don't think we touched all that much on Sabretooth.
Yeah.
Mr. Sinister might not have quite got his due. Apocalypse could have been his own podcast to those who understand the character and know how big of a deal he is. I mean, I absolutely have to come back. I just need a break. I can't. If I had to like look at all the major, some of the major titles, like, okay, what's up? I do Ghost Rider next, for example. And I feel like if I sat down to do the research and something inside me would just sink. And I just need a little bit. I need a little bit of a break. I need a little something else so I can.
All right.
I can respect it more when I come back to it. I can look forward to it. I can delve back into the medium and not kind of be like, overwhelmed with how many I've done and how many I still have to do and all that fun stuff. So, there's absolutely going to be chapter 2, probably 3. I mean, knowing, again, just how deep the medium can be.
Sure. Well, I for one, will be listening, and I appreciate you having me on tonight for sure, definitely.
All right, you've been a blast.
Awesome.
All right, it is plug time. So, is there anything you need to plug?
I will. I have a few things here, as a matter of fact. First and foremost, Radulich and Broadcasting Network. I'm on a podcast called From the Cheap Seats with Jason Teasley and Robert Cooper. And normally, I know there's going to be some schedule changes coming up, and for the life of me, I can't remember where I'm going. But I know we should have another show coming up this coming Thursday. As to what time, that varies. Usually it's between 9 and 10. We've done them at 11 o'clock. Last week was a good show. We did. We had Mark Radulich on in place of Robert Cooper there, and Robert Cooper went and got a job, and now he's got a life. I don't understand why he left podcasting and went and got a job, for crying out loud. But no, I'm glad he's bettering himself. That's for dang sure. But Mark Radulich came on there last week. We talked Michael Sam, which was the openly gay football player. We talked social media's impact on sports and life in general. We got into some talks about Donald Sterling's comments versus Mark Cuban's comments, which I think were Mark Cuban made some comments that day, so we were kind of commenting on that. Bill Cosby came up. We started. Mark and Teasley started reciting Bill Cosby himself.
Oh, I love that. Of all the stand-up routines I've seen, all the specials, and look, I'm not a big comedy guy. His thing, start to finish, with Bill Cosby himself, to this day, I will laugh so hard my sides start hurting. It kills me.
And you can recite. I mean, yeah, they were reciting
and just tell you not to pick your teeth, and you sit in their chair. The first thing they grab is an iron hook.
Oh, some great stuff. So they started reciting that, and it took me back. I can remember actually listening to the freaking record of that. But anyway, and Mark Radulich does not listen to rap, apparently, even though he has named a few songs right off the bat before he made that comment that were absolutely rap songs. So I don't know what he's talking about. But anyway, we had a good time. We had a good time there last Thursday, and this coming Thursday we should have another show. We do have a Facebook page for the Cheap Seat, From the Cheap Seats, Facebook.com/Cheap Seats. RIB, that's Radulich and Broadcasting. And the only other thing I want to plug is that I'm going to TriCon tomorrow. And I don't know if you've heard any of the other podcasts there, Winfree, but Mick Foley is going to be in Huntington, West Virginia tomorrow. And they're going to be having what they call the Tri-State Comic-Con. It's only one day, and the Casual Heroes will be there. And so I'm going to go down and kind of talk to Gavin and Chris, and if Chris wants to talk, he don't like to talk to people, but we'll want to talk. And I think Teasley may make it down there, but the main thing is to get down there and get a picture with Mick Foley. As the Casual Heroes are sponsoring Mick Foley, I definitely want to get down there. I've never had a chance to meet Mick Foley. Always been a dream of mine. I've been a huge fan of the guy for a very long time, and I kind of go into that on the last podcast. But yeah, TriCon, if you guys are in the area, stop by and support Mick support your local comic book store. Support some vendors, and that's kind of fitting considering I'm getting up at 6:30 in the morning and heading down there tomorrow. So it's going to be it's fun that I got to talk comics tonight, and tomorrow I get to buy some.
Oh, hey, if you can synthesize your goals and what you're doing over the week, if it all lines up, that's just icing on the cake. What's the point of steak without the gravy?
There you go, my man. That's right. That's all I have, man.
All right. As for me, okay, Mike, I write specifically, generally about mixed martial arts in the MMA zone of 411mania.com. Apparently, my last article seems to have incensed an individual who I believe is T.J. Dillashaw's mother masquerading as a man who called me out for not heaping effluent praise on his performance. By the same token, I don't think clear enough, but my latest article is up live. I talk about T.J. Dillashaw's upset of Renan Barão that nobody saw coming, except T.J. Dillashaw's mother and his training partners, apparently. I don't even think they believed it until they actually saw it happen. There was just shock all over their faces as they showed it in the crowd. But I also talk about high-level MMA and what that entails, why it's not necessarily, because I pointed this out. A lot of the things that T.J. Dillashaw did from a pure striking perspective were bad, but it worked. And some of that is because the way you fight in MMA is not the way you fight in pure striking. You're not in a position to capitalize on all of the advantages and all of the holes left by someone crossing their feet all the time when moving, not moving their head enough, keeping their hands down. I understand there's some baiting. I get it. By the same token, there's some holes there that, for whatever you can't capitalize on because it's MMA and not pure striking. So I talk a little about high-level MMA, how it's going to look in the future, maybe. Kind of some fun stuff that I thought of, and I've incensed someone for not just heaping praise on T.J. Dillashaw. It was a heck of a performance. Nobody expected it. I can't take away from anything that he did. He beat up a guy who was like a 9-1 favorite. So, but that's my latest article over there. Give it a read, check it out, see if you agree that I'm just full of crap, which I might be. I can't tell for sure. I host the 411 Ground and Pound radio show every Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern, myself, and I'm looking for a third man. Pat Mullen has bid adieu to the world of mixed martial arts, so he's not going to be on the show anymore. I could use a third panelist. I like the three-man format, especially for when talking about MMA. So anybody listening, if you've got the time and the inclination, hit me up, let me know. I'm open to having a third member. Right now it's just me and Jeff Harris. And like I said, I just like the three-man format as a general rule. Every now and then I've done shows with just me and Jeff. I've done shows with just me and Pat. But as a general rule, I like the three-man format. More interplay. So, again, anybody out there, let me know. I'm on Twitter at Winfree MMA. That's my last name, WINFREE MMA. So follow me on Twitter. I'm on Facebook. There aren't too many Robert Winfrees, although I need to go ahead and make this. I need to get a Facebook page up for Everyone Loves a Bad Guy. I can't keep doing it all through my personal account if I'm going to keep trying to, do it and grow it and all that fun stuff. Although I will then be able...
I was going to say, they make it pretty easy. It's actually pretty easy. I don't know if you're familiar with doing it very very often, but the one for the cheap seats actually was pretty easy to make. So, man, get one up. I'd love to see it. I was just sitting there thinking about that today, as a matter of fact. I was like, I wonder if he's got a page.
No, not yet, but I will be getting on it. Of course, the downside is my ego will then be bruised when I can't break like double-digit likes.
Sitting there at 9 and you're like sending invites all day. Damn it, somebody just hit 10.
I just want to hit 10. I'll be looking into that. If you like MMA, I'm not doing coverage this week. Yay me. Larry Zonka, the boss at 411 Mania, will have coverage of, I think he's got UFC Fight Night 41, which is from Berlin, Germany. I think it's Berlin. It's from Germany. And is held exclusively on Fight Pass. He's got live coverage for that. Then there's the finale of The Ultimate Fighter Brazil 3, featuring Stipe Miocic and Fabio Maldonado in your main event. And if you just heard me die a little inside, I did. But I don't think anyone has coverage for that yet. It's not me. I have other stuff to do. Sorry. I've done it for so many weeks in a row. I just need a break.
I was wondering. Let me jump in here real quick. You were talking. I know you and Mark were talking about. You have a curse, correct? If you cover it,
yes.
it sucks, right? So I was
either that or a member of Team Alpha Male becomes a UFC champion. That That's what happened at 173. I started poking fun at the MMA gods because every fight, every card I'd watched, every card I had covered for like 3 or 4 in a row had been just lackluster, paced poorly, slews of unmemorable fights, and a couple of bad fights. With a couple of, on the whole, the events were fair to middling at best, with a couple of good fights here and there. So I decided to call out the MMA gods on this little bit of chicanery. Their response was, well, you don't like the guys at Team Alpha Male. Deal with this. I have been duly chastised, MMA gods.
Oh, nice. Well, if you stop covering it now, maybe the sport will recover and they'll actually have.
Tell you what, if the whatever random intern is listening to this podcast happens to know the unpaid UFC intern, hey, throw it up the ladder. You can pay me a nominal amount of money, say, I don't know, $60 a month, and I'll stop doing coverage, and your shows will improve in quality. You don't want the sport to keep going down the toilet, you can pay me off.
Wow. And talk about a strange take on pay-per-view. I mean, they're like, we got to pay this guy. We got to pay this guy so people will watch.
Oh,
that's awesome.
So so those are being covered live on the MMA Zone of 411mania.com. Be sure to check out the Radulich and Broadcasting Network. We've got all kinds of stuff. In fact, this Tuesday, coming up a couple of days from now, I'm back hosting The Long Road to Ruin, myself, Sean Comer, and at this time, I believe we're slated to have Benjamin J. Colon come on, and we're going to spend a couple of episodes tackling the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. I've seen the title art that Benjamin did for this couple of shows. It's awesome. He continues to one-up himself. He outdoes himself every time. Plus, I finally get the zinger after Sean Comer is constantly the one getting over on everyone else, including putting me in the reverse bear trap when we talked about Saw. Joke's on you. It killed one guy in 7 movies. But I finally get the zinger on Sean in this one. So, but again, keep an eye out for that. This first episode coming up, that's, again, Tuesday the 3rd. We're going to be reviving what I'm referring to as the Hellraiser formula. We're going to spend the first episode talking about the good entries in the franchise. Then the next episode is going to be the bad one. And when you have this many entries, we figure that's the appropriate way to break it up. Sometimes it falls that way naturally. Sometimes we have to maneuver things a little bit. But so if you're fans of movies, the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, have a listen. We're going to have some fun with that one. So keep your eye on that for The Long Road to Ruin. Here next week on Everyone Loves a Bad Guy. I'm not sure yet. I'm debating, again, maybe taking a week off just to fully recharge. But if I find myself recharged and re-energized just by subject matter, I've got to talk with Mark because he has called dibs on discussing The Simpsons and the villains that oppose poor Homer and Marge and Bart. So if I have one next week, that's my tentative plan right now. Again, Mark has dibs since he's the boss. If he can't do it, then I have to find something else. But that's my tentative schedule right now is next Friday, come back, and Mr. Burns, Sideshow Bob, Nelson Muntz, Jimbo Jones, all the lovable characters from the great city of Springfield will be dissected here by myself and Mark Radulich. So look forward to that. I hope to see you all there, and thank you so very much for listening. Jesse, it's been a pleasure having you on. Thank you very much for stepping up here for this one. I didn't want to ramble to myself.
Oh, I'm very happy to be here, man. Thanks.
Well, have a good trip tomorrow, and good luck getting to meet Mick Foley.
Thank you. Will do.
All right. To everyone else out there, remember, I'm going to have to come up with a slightly different sign-off, apparently, because I'm not just talking about comic book villains anymore. But without villains, all of your heroes are just funny guys in tights with capes. Have a good night, and be safe, everyone. I'll see you back here next week.
So say good night to the bad guy.